Alright, so for our final video content of this week, we're going to look at two very contrasting views or models and theories as to how firms may or may not achieve above average returns. And the first of these that we're going to look at is the industrial organisation or IO model of above average returns. Now this model says that the industry or segments of an industry in which a firm operates has a stronger influence on how well that firm is going to go than the actual choices the managers inside the organisations make. So it basically says that it's these external factors which will determine whether or not your firm is going to be successful. So these key things like economies of scale, the barriers to market entry, the diversification and the degree of concentration of other firms in the industry are said to be key determinants of a firm's ability to achieve above average returns according to the IO model. A good example or a good supporting case of the IO model is the case of Holden and indeed the other local Australian car manufacturing firms. A key part, not entirely perhaps, but a key part of the reason why these firms have all announced that they are closing and ceasing manufacturing of cars here in Australia is due to these external factors. The fact that things like exchange rates and the labour prices within the particular Australian economy and industry have meant that it is simply too difficult for them to survive and generate a profit. And that has, as I say, played a key role in their decisions to cease manufacturing here. Research has revealed, though, that only about 20% of a firm's profitability tends to be, on average, explained by the industry and these external factors. The reason why that's the case is the IO model, it tends to be a more of a traditional model, and as a result of that, a lot of the assumptions upon which it is based no longer hold in the current dynamic environment. We can see some of these assumptions here, and it's not to say that it's completely wrong, but what you will find, even just from looking at some of these assumptions, is that many of them, or at least some of them, probably don't translate so well into a modern context or environment. So the IO model says in order for it to be able to correctly predict that the external factors will be the key determinants of a firm's success, the external environment will impose pressures and constraints that determine strategies leading to above average returns. That's a fair assumption. It also assumes that most firms competing in an industry or industry segment control similar strategically relevant resources and pursue similar strategies. Now, you can already guess that that's probably not always going to be the case. It also assumes that resources used to implement strategies are highly mobile across firms. That is, that you can easily either steal them or copy them or take a type of resource from one firm to another. Again, that is not always quite so easily done. And finally, the IO model assumes that organisational decision makers that will be rational and committed to acting in the firm's best interest. If you've seen any of those headlines where key strategic management figures within firms have either embezzled money or engaged in practices which haven't exactly helped the firm and have often earned them a nice little pay rise, you will know that these key organisational decision makers do not always make rational decisions in the firm's best interest. So you can see why this model may be a little bit limited in the current context in explaining how much of a firm's ability to earn above average returns. We can see a diagrammatic representation of this model here. Don't stress too much about this, but just these key points down the side here are the main takeaways from this slide. The IO model says that you need to look at these external factors, identify an industry where you can earn a profit, identify the strategy that will be determined by those external factors in order to make a profit, put that into place, and then implement the strategy. That's the key takeaway of the IO model. A very different view of how a firm may earn above average returns is the resource-based model. You may hear it called the RBV or the resource-based view. It has a number of similar names, but they all refer to this key model, which says that an organisation represents a collection of unique resources and capabilities that will provide it with the basis for not only its strategy but also its ability to earn above average returns. So unlike the IO model, which looks at those external environment factors, we're now looking internally as through the resource-based model. So it says that in order for these resources and capabilities which all firms possess, in order for them to translate into a source of competitive advantage and therefore an ability to earn above average returns, they need to meet 4 requirements according to this model. They need to be valuable, they need to be rare, they need to be inimitable, that is, unable to be copied, and non-substitutable. That means you cannot have something else which does the same job. Now we're going to go into the RBV in more detail, and certainly with regards to creating a sustainable source of competitive advantage over the coming weeks, but recognizing that resource and capabilities need to meet those 4 criteria according to the RBV is really crucial moving forward. Like the IO model, the resource-based model does have some assumptions on which the whole theory is proposed. And again, you might see that some of these may not translate quite so well into the modern context, but it's probably a bit more relevant and translates a bit better than the IO model. So it assumes that there are differences in firms' performances which will be primarily due to their unique resources and capabilities rather than those external environment factors and influences. It also assumes that firms will acquire different resources and develop unique capabilities based on how they combine and use their resources, unlike the IO model, which assumes that the firms have pretty much the same resources. The RBV assumes that resources and capabilities are not highly mobile across firms, again, unlike the IO model, and also assumes differences in resources and capabilities to be the basis of competitive advantage. And again, research tends to be more supportive of the RBV in terms of being able to predict a firm's ability to earn above average returns. So what are these key concepts, these resources, capabilities and core competencies that the RBV tends to focus on? They are really important to understand. Resources, first of all, are inputs into a firm's production process. So anything that the firm uses to make whatever it makes or do whatever it does. So these can be either physical, human or organizational capital. So they can be the people in your organization, they can be the machinery that they have there, they can be the knowledge that a firm and its workforce possesses. They can also be classified as tangible or intangible, so it's things that you can literally see and that are right there in front of you, or things which are more invisible, things like knowledge and skills, which you know exist, but you can't actually touch them as such. Capabilities involve the capacity for a set of resources to perform a task or activity in an integrative manner. So what we're looking at here, capabilities are when you combine your resources, and typically it involves the combination of tangible and intangible resources to basically undertake a process and do a good job of it. So, for example, if you combine the machinery, which is a tangible resource within your firm, with the skills of your employees to operate that machinery, which represents an intangible resource, then you are able to often develop a capability with regards to the manufacturing of a particular product. These capabilities tend to evolve over time. It's very difficult for a firm to immediately have access to capabilities. And they must be managed dynamically in pursuit of above average returns. That is, the capabilities today, which might give you a bit of an advantage over your firm, will not necessarily give you an advantage into the future. You need to continually update your capabilities as a firm. They should not be so simple that your competitors can copy them. They need to be complex and difficult enough that not anyone can do it, but at the same time they shouldn't be so complicated that the people within them cannot, within your firm, cannot control them and have that understanding of them. Examples of resources and capabilities. These resources can be your capital equipment, the machinery, the skills of individual employees, like my man Nick Revold on the previous slide. He has plenty of skills, don't you worry. Patents, the finances, and of course the talented managers and or footballers you have within your organisation all represent key examples of resources. Capabilities, as I say, often focus on processes or often of functions that a firm possesses and does well. So if your firm has expertise within production practices and processes, you might have expertise within research and development. These processes and functions within an organisation are typically what we look at when we examine a firm's capabilities. Finally, core competencies are resources and capabilities that serve as a source of competitive advantage for a firm over its rivals. So what we're saying here is that you as a firm may possess resources and potentially even capabilities which might be valuable, but they won't in isolation represent a source of competitive advantage. Now, we'll go into this in more detail over the coming weeks, but as we touched on before, the resource-based view says that for resources or capabilities to represent core competencies and therefore a source of competitive advantage, they need to meet those 4 criteria: valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable. Core competencies are often visible in the form of organisational functions again. So Gillette is well renowned for its marketing related capabilities. They get high profile sports stars like our men over here, Roger Federer, Tiger Woods, etc., and put them in pictures with razors, and surprisingly to some perhaps, that often then helps improve their brand image and awareness. Virgin Blue is well renowned for its low cost features and their ability to save costs or to increase the cost savings in how they run their business, certainly compared to more premium brands like Qantas. Starbucks is well renowned for its supply chain relationships and in particular being able to keep the low cost of its suppliers down and the delivery of those suppliers to the stores. And Monash certainly would like to consider itself as having a core competence with regards to its international reach and its research profile. So you often hear Monash talking about how they have a wide range of researchers who have multiple publications in different journals and so on, and also the international reach, perhaps better than any other university in Australia. Monash has campuses all over the world. Now we can see in the pictures up here, this is Monash's campus in Malaysia. Monash has campuses in South Africa, we have campuses in India, China, all over the world, as well as obviously the multiple campuses here in Melbourne and Victoria. So as a result of that, we like to consider ourselves as having a more global perspective than many of the other competing universities, and it also obviously provides us with the opportunity to meet a wider range of customers in these different markets across the world.